the adverse effects that they are bringing to the area where they are carrying out their mining activities, so that they leave it somehow better or much better than they found it. Because it has to be a win-win for the community. Once a mining company leaves that area, the community will continue nursing the wounds that have been done to the environment. A typical example is the Kalengwa mine. I've picked on that because I've just been very close to that area. The area now is a ghost town, and no benefits whatsoever can be accrued from the Kalengwa mine, although some investors are showing indications of going into it. But the damage has been done. The mining company has fled with the profits that they have accrued from the area. The community remains as it was, maybe even worse than they were found. So therefore, there is need for communities and mining companies to go into agreements, written agreements, so that no one will run away from the marriage of convenience that has been entered into.
We always have a challenge with the investors each time they come into the area to invest. You will be surprised that this guy will agree with the chief, and then he will not tell us at the district level. And then when he goes to implement it, the chief doesn't get the result. And find that when you go to visit their Royal Highnesses, they will give you still the pressure to say, look, this is the problem that I'm going with this investor. And so we need to actually, on the corporate social responsibility program, it's not that enough to bear on the social corporate responsibility program. For me, the way forward, we should just have to say the chiefs now should be a partner. They should have shares in the mining. And if the mining is done in headman or senior headman, whichever in place, or junior chief or whatever, that also senior headman has to be given a share. Because this is the only way that extractive issues under this Center for Justice can be held. And otherwise, for me, I would like to see that they are Royal Highnesses. They have got 2% share or 5% share, and the actual mining, wherever it has been happening. Because you see, when a company goes into the community, it doesn't just go straight to the palace. It goes also to the headman. The headman of that area releases the land and its people. I would like to see the way forward that the headman also is given a share. If they get extractive copper for 10 million, and then the headman is given also just 0.5% share, which is 300,000 kwacha perhaps per 3 months.
I want this concept maybe with my Royal Highnesses from Singapore. Let it go. Let's go and actually educate our mining companies so that maybe they can also get this idea of getting these bamboo trees. Instead of just planting trees alone, let's also plant bamboo trees along with the normal trees. So that as people, as we take this sensitization, we'll tell them to say it is more profitable. There is more profit in actually planting a bamboo tree because it grows like grass. It's not like a tree that will take maybe 5 years, and then one cuts it in only 3 days, it cuts 17 or 18. But it's more profitable to have a bamboo tree than you cut a bamboo tree than a mere tree.
It is important at this moment that we enter into agreements where we go into that agreement as partners. Let the investor come with their money and let the chiefdom come with the land as equity partners. They can go away with the 51% and let the chiefdom remain with 49%. At least, we shall not remain as poor as we used to be after they have used our resources.
The chief should not subject to social corporate responsibility, and their headmen, they should be shareholders of the extractive industries, because it is in that line where we see meaningful empowerment in the local community. When you have whatever resources that the mine can raise in that particular area, the chiefs should be the shareholder because they remain permanently. For us politicians, we go, but this is my position that I would think so.
I feel over the social corporate responsibility, when the mining companies or those investors that come in, when they give it, let it be felt by everyone. We are not supposed to maybe leave out the chiefs or maybe the leadership from within the chiefdom. Let them also enjoy. If it means it's a gold mining company, why should a white person wear a gold necklace? Why is someone from where that gold is actually produced can't even know, they don't even know how it looks like. I feel let there be the ownership of all these minerals, where they are coming from. Let the local people enjoy first. And also, to me, the corporate social responsibility should leave an impact to the community where it's coming.
Looking at the DCs, they are part of government. Government has a policy of decentralization. And I would want, when we are speaking, we are representing the government, we wanted to know the policies that could help. For example, they are chairman of their DDCs, District Development Coordinating Committees. I think this is a chair. How do they involve the chief or the traditional leadership? Because that is the forum where such issues like we are discussing can be discussed. Because we will feel that as traditional leaders, we are together with government now in trying to discuss with the companies what we want them to do. Chiefdoms on their own, yes, there are some initiatives. Some chiefdoms have negotiated with companies on their own. I know a few areas, like in, take for example, in Ndola, Senior Chief Chiwala. You go to Soweto, chiefs have taken initiatives to discuss with companies on their own. But should it be like this every time? No, it should be together with government.
I want to report to you, say during DDCC, as I chaired DDCC, the Royal Highnesses are always in the meetings. And you know, they have a pillar. This time we don't report as a department, we report using pillars. So chiefs are very important during that time. We get consultation and also their views and also their contributions are so cutting. Secondly, policies are there. Quite okay, policies are there. And some of them are still in drafts though. But in Sinazongo, I would say, in my district, the policy of corporate social responsibility is there. If a mining company is coming there, one policy that you have to look at is the environment of the people, the livelihood of the community there. What are you going to do? That is one policy you have to actually tackle before you start your
It will be focusing on environmental impact assessments, procedures, and challenges. And our panelists will be Zema. Do we have Zema here already? Yes, she is present. ZDA, Zambia Development Agency. Okay, EITA, they are here. And then ActionAid Geoffrey. Please kindly come forward. I will now hand over to Madam Isabel to take up this session.
Good morning, Your Royal Highnesses. Welcome to the second day of our dialogue. We'll straight away go into the session that is aiming to discuss issues related to environmental impact assessments as well as strategic environmental assessments. I think the panel has already been introduced, but allow me to recognize the presence of Director Banda. Thank you for making it to this discussion. I think perhaps just to aid the discussion before we go into very specific questions related to this session, Let me just pose this question specifically to Zema to briefly explain what an environmental impact assessment is and what a strategic environmental assessment is, so that it provides a bit of clarity of what these processes refer to and how, in terms of policy framework, they are actually supposed to be delivered. Director Banda?
So the strategic environmental assessment, this is an assessment that is done on a policy plan or program that is likely to have an adverse impact on the environment. So when you hear the word policy plan or program, already we are tailored to see that these are processes that are spearheaded or undertaken by the government or any government institution. So in terms of the Environmental Management Act, there is a requirement that before that policy plan or program is adopted by the government, that policy plan or program must go through the strategic environmental assessment so that we are able to identify what the possible impacts associated with the implementation of that policy. Then the environmental impact assessment is project-based, if I might say. So we have a strategic environmental assessment at policy level. Then once the strategic environmental assessment has been adopted, and then a particular individual wants them to set up a specific project. So if I can give an example, a person then wants to set up a service station. So that particular service station would have to go through the environmental impact assessment process. So the EIA is meant basically to assess the impact that would be associated to a particular project. So you then notice that the SEA is more on a broader scale, while the EIA is project-based and then it's at the project level. So in terms of how the two relate to each other, in terms of practicalities and the way the EMA has been structured, the requirement is that firstly there must be an SEA done. So for example, if we're looking at Lusaka, since I gave the example of the service station, what the expectation would be if we're dealing with service stations is that we should have a strategic environmental assessment that is going to be done on service stations in Lusaka. So that you identify what is the current capacity for Lusaka, where can they sit, how many can be in which area. Once that is approved, then now the individual service stations that will be located in specific areas will then have to go through the EIA. In summary, that's what I can say. Thank you.
I think we have seen a situation where mining licenses have been given in protected areas. We have also seen an emerging kind of situation where exploration licenses have been given in national parks. The West Lunga National Park, which is also a national park categorized as one with depleted wildlife, is an example where an exploration license application has been pushed so far. We did have the Lower Zambezi case, and of course we've had other cases where other types of mining activities are proposed along sensitive areas in terms of water resources. From the Zema perspective, the process explained is very clear. However, practically we see that there are very many challenges that could present problems in protecting key or highly sensitive ecological areas. Could you just perhaps then speak to whether there are certain gaps within the law, or whether in terms of practice some of these EIAs may not be done thoroughly enough? What would be the justification for doing exploration of mining activities in the West Lunga, for example? What is the justification for doing mining activities in the Lower Zambezi National Park? What is the justification for doing a large-scale infrastructure program right next to a river that is highly sensitive to that kind of development? Perhaps you could speak to those issues very quickly.
Allow me to place a disclaimer that on the justification of the issuance of mining licenses, I'm thinking the Ministry Ministry of Mines would be better placed to answer in terms of the considerations that they take into account when issuing the licenses. But in terms of the activities related, coming to the mandate of ZEMA, one key principle under the Environmental Management Act will recognize one fundamental principle of environmental management, and that is about the need to strike a balance between environmental protection and economic development, because we only develop by exploiting our natural resources. But tied to that is the principle of sustainable use. In as much as we are exploiting our natural resources, this must be done in an environmentally sustainable manner. So the way the Act currently on environmental management is couched is that the fact that a proposed activity is taking place in an environmentally protected area, in a national park, for example, that in itself is not a bar on whether or not that activity should take place. But the fact that it's sitting in a national park qualifies it to go through the EIA. Because if it was not in the national park, it was just in any other area, then the adverse effects might not be, the presumption for adverse effects might not arise. So the issue then that needs to be then assessed critically in the EIA is that this project is being proposed in an environmentally sensitive area. What are the risks that are associated to this, and have these risks been adequately mitigated? So those are the issues that we look at in terms of assessment. And then there have been instances, look at examples you've given, where ZEMA says, in as much as you are saying this can be mitigated, this can't go on. And then the project cannot go on, and then an approval is not granted. So there are there's that balance that we strike in terms of mitigation measures and the identified impacts that the project is likely to have on the environment. Thank you.
The Environmental Management Act of 2011 has these objectives. Number one is to promote integrated environmental management. Two, to protect and conserve the natural resources. Three, to promote sustainable management of natural resources. It goes further also to talk about the state that every citizen shall take part in promoting and also preventing the misuse of these natural resources. So this is the law that was put in place to ensure that everyone participates in the management of the natural resources. But currently what we're experiencing is that during these assessments, there is a section of group in society, for example, we talk about women and the young people. They are not consulted. I was keenly following the submission from the Royal Highnesses. Clearly it shows that they have got an understanding and they have got points. But if we are to bring an ordinary woman who is affected as a result of these mining activities, will they be able to understand this technical jargon we're discussing today? Absolutely not. So our appeal, for example, to ZEMA is that, can you summarize some of these documents, for example, to make sure that they are understood by any ordinary Zambian? The decentralization policy clearly states and gives guidelines in terms of the structures which are available there at local level and the spaces which can ensure that everyone participates. The challenge we have in Zambia, if you look at the decentralization policy of 2002, clearly states that functions, resources should be devolved to local level. Why? Because it's easier to manage at that level. It's cost effective. And it will ensure that there's inclusivity in terms of decision-making structures. At policy level, how many ordinary women, young people are consulted in their local languages
Yesterday, allow me to say that there's lack of information among the ordinary Zambia, and this has been a cry for quite a long time, especially the young people and even the women. For example, let's talk about issues of displacement. We know that mining activities are quite a high risk undertaking, and sometimes they attract displacement. The compensation which are there are the ordinary citizens being consulted. So we find that even their livelihood, it changes. You move them from the place where they have been inherited for many, many years, you take them elsewhere. There's no water, there's no schools, there's no play parks. And simply because we are taking advantage of these people, because they don't understand these jargons, this technical language too. Yesterday someone mentioned about Botswana. Botswana is a role model. On Friday, like tomorrow, most of the people in Botswana will be rushing to go into their villages because it's so developed. If you go to Namibia, at Katima, they came to Zambia and learned about the decentralization policy. Just go and see Katima, the way it is developed. People from Seychelles, they go there to buy groceries and stuff like that. It's about action and also evolving the functions and the resources to local level so that it can be better managed. You've heard the knowledge from all our Royal Highnesses. Young people, they have got the technical know-how. They are innovative. So I think for me, the issue of participation in decision-making, policy formulation, and also the involvement of these processes, it's number one on the agenda for action. Thank you.
The environmental impact assessment actually is done by the company that would want to do an environmental project. They hire a consultant to help them do the assessment. So it's not really done by ZEMA itself. ZEMA actually just looks at the document and sees if really they are adhering to or they are complying to the guidelines that ZEMA has. So maybe from the, Isabel mentioned that I talk about community experience. I think we've done quite a lot of work on these environmental impact assessment processes in this country. To agree with what my brother is saying here is that if you look at the EIA report for a mining company, for instance, it could be a document that is 300 or 200 pages. Honestly, I'm thinking, how can communities really monitor the obligations that the company has made? So the challenge maybe that will be there is that yes, the company have committed to say this is how we are going to mitigate the impact. But the question that somebody can ask is that how will communities monitor whether the company is adhering to the mitigation when this document is quite too big for them? I've been to some districts whereby you even go to the DC's office, they don't even have EIAs for the companies that are operating in the areas. So you imagine if the government office does not even have a copy of that document, what about the communities themselves? So the process itself, I think, is a very, very good process. I think the consultation is there, but what is important for me is how can you monitor the process in terms of going beyond the consultation process. We have some cases, there's an example, one of our activities in Eastern Province where a consultant asked community members whether there is, sorry, it's not a joke, but this is serious. They asked community members whether there is anybody who, whoever wants to receive some lunch should put up their hand. And everybody puts up their hand. Then they took a picture and they said, when this question we asked communities whether they would want this project to take place or not, and everybody's hand was up. And the picture was there showing that everybody had agreed. But the question that was asked was about lunch, not necessarily the project. So what I'm trying to say is that maybe what is important is for traditional leaders, civil society, government departments who work together in terms of having capacity to monitor the mitigation impacts.
I think the question there is to try and understand whether communities do have some kind of information around the local plans in their areas, and if these local plans show that there are large-scale developments coming, how is that coordination happening practically? What is the level of capacity building that is also going down to the community level in as far as EIAs are concerned? I think you did submit that sometimes the report is bulky. Mr. Sianzala also spoke to the fact that sometimes it's not a matter of summarizing the report, it's simplicity, and there's a difference. You can summarize a highly technical report and it still remains technical. The question is, do communities understand what the EIA is saying? Even in cases where Zema gives a decision letter, are communities able to understand what the decision letter is saying? So I think Mr. Sianzala spoke about simplicity. Can we then just zero in on that question, Mr. Mandawande? Help us understand whether communities do have an understanding of planned projects and whether they are adequately prepared, trained, and speaking to some aspects that were raised by Mr. Sianzala, Director Banda, the question to you, perhaps to help us discuss, is around simplification of the procedures, the level of awareness that Zema is doing, and the level of capacity building that could be done by Zema. Thank you.
In as much as we can't have offices everywhere in the country, the Act allows us to appoint honorary inspectors in each region. Then those honorary inspectors who act as agents of Zema where environmental matters are concerned. So there's actually a process that has already started where we intend to engage honorary inspectors as a way of decentralizing our services. And also my colleague here earlier talked about devolution. Currently there's a government policy on devolution that is taking place, and the engagements that we've been having with our ministry is actually to devolve certain functions of Zema to the local authorities, because almost every place we go to in Zambia has a local authority there. So there's that process that is taking place. Coming to the issue of simplicity, again, I couldn't agree more. Because if you look at the current legal structure in terms of EIA, there's an obligation on the developer to say that at the time that they are advertising their project in the newspapers and placing them in those public places, they must translate them in a language that the local people understand. Because at the time that the report is coming to Zema, the expectation is that we would have already engaged the community, and that report reflects not only the intentions of this particular developer, but also the wishes of the community in terms of how the project is going to be done. But that does not end there, because once the report has been analyzed and we've got comments from the other stakeholders, Zema goes back on the ground to do what we call a verification inspection. And sometimes we do hold public meetings. We look at the register that the developer gave us in terms of the people that they consulted. And we have meetings with those people for them to confirm whether really what has been submitted is what the engagement was about. So through such interactions, others do confirm that they were consulted, but others, like the example that was given, such issues arise to say, yes, there was a meeting that was held, but what you're telling us is not what was discussed at that meeting. At that point, then we hold the developer accountable for them to be able to do the corrective measures that they do. So the engagement is there, but I agree that probably there could be some gaps that we may need to work on so that we make the process more effective.
For you to prove that there's been some water pollution, you need to have a scientific, you have to have a scientific assessment. And what we see is that most of our communities will tell you our water is polluted. But you know, in a layman's language, yes, there's pollution, but we want, what is their proof? What kind of proof do they have that this water is really polluted? We've had instances where communities have complained. We take them to go and do the assessment and find that that water is not polluted. So for me, the issue is that how can communities have the capacity, how can we empower communities and our traditional leaders to have the capacity that if they are talking pollution, then they have scientific evidence. It's not just about seeing that, I've seen that this water is brown or what, but you really have to come up with some scientific information that will testify that that water is really polluted. So, but at the end of, looking at everything, I think we really need to work, the response needs to be a multi-dimensional approach where line government departments are there, communities. Once, normally these misunderstandings come because of lack of information. But if we are working together, I think we can really achieve something. I think we did some work in Kankoyo, in Mufuria, engaging Mopani on the sulfur emissions. And I understand the past 2-3 years, they've, I think they've done quite a lot in terms of reducing that emission out of the engagements that we've done.
So what is important is, at what stage do you bring on board the community to start engaging? Are you going to bring them when you started implementation, or in the moment when you just introduce the idea in the community? Because those are some of the answers we're supposed to be answering and finding strategies. So really our appeal is to see that at the initial stage, even also our appeal to the Royal Highnesses, that when these investors come to you, ensure that in the meeting, in the Nkuta there, it is all inclusive. Young people, women, men, they are there in the initial discussion. Then there will be this appreciation. I'm sorry to say that if you go in the construction site right now, some sites, they are written in Chinese. Who can read Chinese in our villages? And these are some of the things that we are saying, that this becomes already a barrier in terms of understanding what that project is all about. And we always talk about compliance. In Zambia, we're not short of the laws. That's about implementation and also compliance. If pollution continues to happen, it means that the rights of the people are not being respected. There's an infringement of the rights. Because people have got the right to access to clean water. And community members, they are able to tell. For example, they will tell you, the water here is no longer testing the way it used to test yesterday. They will start experiencing maybe cases of diarrhea, urinary infection. Then they will go to the clinic. I'm giving this example because, for example, we're working in a road there. And these are some of the cases. And when you go into the clinic, they'll tell you, during this period, there was an outbreak. Already then you start investigating what is causing this. You find that maybe it's a result of pollution. For example, again, allow me to highlight not only the issue of pollution. There's also issues of harassment, sexual harassment. I read in the newspaper not too long ago how the young people during this COVID were impregnated by some workers who are working in some mining areas in Mufunza. All these are some of the issues which we use as the basis to evaluate the performance.
How does the environmental impact assessment help in that area so that the hole or the tunnels that have been produced by the extractions are maintained, that they do not endanger the lives of the people who remain in that ghost town?
These things that we are discussing are a matter of education and information levels, which are lacking in most of the chiefdoms. But what I wanted to say about my district commissioners were that they are very, very wonderful district commissioners who have worked very well in the Sinazongwe district. And we wanted to support them. Madam Mulea mentioned one important aspect which we're still following even to the new discussion that is going on. and that one of, you know, higher policies coming, you know, down to, you start from there and then come down. And this is exactly what Zema has also explained. When you find very good DCs who are working like them, the two of them, I think we need to applaud them because they are working with the community and they really need to be supported.
In my chiefdom, we have gone into partnership through Chikwanda Chiefdom Development Trust with one of the companies in the UK, where we have gone into silk farming, for which I offloaded 5,000 hectares, and which will create almost 2,000 jobs. And these people, you know, in my chiefdom right now, my subjects are impatient, because we can't start any work until Zema gives us a certificate to go ahead. Because we have formed a company called Mupika with this company from UK. Mupika Sericulture, it's a silk farming. And you know silk farming comes from whales. So it has become difficult for us because we have been waiting. And again, you know, we are in rains. There are some people who have been displaced and they need compensation. And up to this time, nothing is forthcoming from them. But all the processes which we've explained as a UTO, you have done what you call on the ground. But the bureaucracy, time factor, like one of our moderators there said, you know, project, for those who have done project management, there is always a begin time and a start time and end time.
That has been mining for over 100 years. Look at the Chimbola old mine. Who is going to buy those? And if there is such mines, why are they not buying those pits which are so dangerous? So I just want one example of such mining that was buried because there's such fund there.
But also, like my colleague has mentioned, this is an issue that requires collaboration. If I can just give an example of, there was an incident in Mulungushi at some point where there was an accident at the site and then it spilled into the stream, the water started turning purple, the fish died and everything. And as Zema moved in, we shut down that facility, told them to clean up. But then the Act also says that that constitutes an offense. And so we commenced proceedings in the subordinate court. That company was prosecuted, they were convicted, and then they were charged 500 kwacha. And so for me, who's coming from Lusaka, first of all, I'm looking at the people to say, you are the people that are in Mulungushi, that experienced this issue firsthand. And this case has been proved, and the person has been convicted, and then you charge them 500 kwacha a company? It doesn't make sense. So in our approach, I think this is an issue that requires collaboration from all the stakeholders to ensure that the issue related to pollution arising from the various activities is really adequately dealt with.
We have been demanding for reforms of the EMA, especially the provision in the law that gives power to the minister to nullify a rejection letter if he feels or she feels that the projects must go on. I say this because we put up these regulatory institutions to help government. You are technocrats, but you put up a rejection letter with very, very clear reasons why you have done that, and then a minister rejects or nullifies that and perhaps recommends the project to go on. So we have been demanding that this provision in the law must go out, because then why do you put up institutions like yours? So how far has this gone in terms of reforming this piece of legislation? Thank you.
So whose mandate is it to ensure that the mining companies submit these EIAs? Is it the Department of Mines or is it your institution? Because for us it would be easy to follow up on the commitments these mining companies are making towards the environment if we can see their EIAs.
we hold the institution in high esteem because we know that it is the only agency mandated by law to protect our environment. So we expect a lot from you. You are doing good, but we think you can do better than what you are doing for now. Why do I say so? When it comes to environmental impact assessments, we have seen that, like you are explaining, the process, when you're explaining it, looks good, but when it comes to actual implementation, you find that the communities are left out, and oftentimes you find that these reports reach the communities even maybe a week before the week is even before the project is implemented. So my comment to you is that you need to decentralize and also ensure that you hold consultative meetings so that the community people, our royal highnesses and their subjects understand this process, because this process we believe is an information process whereby people need to know which project is coming in that area and how they need to benefit.
But what delays the process is the processes that are done before you pay. Because first of all, you have to engage a consultant. The consultant has to do the study, prepare the report. They will submit a draft to ZEMA, which ZEMA will review, give it back, depending on how adequately they attend to the comments. So there's that back and forth. And that's where most of the time is lost. But from the time that you actually pay, it's 45 working days for the environmental project brief. Then for the higher level, because that one is more consultative, there are specific consultations that we need to do. So for that one is 65 working days from the time that you pay. So again, before the payment, there's that back and forth that goes on. So because of that back and forth, probably that's why there's that delay. But it also largely depends on the quality of the consultant that you get. Because we received reports where the consultant will tell you that I have submitted to ZEMA, and we've been called to meetings to say ZEMA were delaying. And yet when you check our record, that report has not even come. So there's that probably needs to be managed in terms of the actual implementation. The second question, how do we reconcile and harmonize the rejections? So the requirement is that even if this mining company has approval from the Ministry of Mines, that approval comes with various conditions and they must satisfy all the conditions. So even if they have an approval from the Ministry of Mines and then ZEMA has rejected the project, that project cannot go on. And even if they have approval from the Ministry of Mines, they have an approval from ZEMA, and ZEMA requires them to consult and get consent from the local traditional leader before they commence. The requirement is that they can't commence until that consent has been granted. So there have been instances where it has been brought to our attention that this person has moved on the ground and I have not consented, and in such instances, ZEMA has issued the necessary enforcement actions for that project not to proceed. There was a question on what happens afterwards. So the EIA is at two phases. There's the EIA that allows you to set up the plant, and then you're supposed to give the lifespan of the project during that EIA. So the understanding is that once the project comes to an end, the person must then also do an EIA for decommissioning, so that then the issues of remediation and restoration come into play. But for most companies, what we have discovered that what actually happens is that they do not decommission. So at the end of that life cycle, then they sell it to another company that then comes and then it continues like that. But to answer the question, there's a requirement for them to also do the EIA for decommissioning and for them to do remediation works. Big awareness that is given for purposes of the thermal power plants. But one of the conditions that we give in the approval is that they must, other than getting the EIA, they are supposed to get what we call operational licenses that deal with how they will run this particular technology and which people they will assign. So one of the requirements is that they must have a qualified person and the person is sensitized. So like you have mentioned, yes, the law is there and the conditions are there, but probably an issue that we need to interrogate is whether they actually do it on the ground. And so we'll take that as a recommendation for purposes of our monitoring to ensure that effective education and awareness is given to the people that are actually working on these facilities.
To the natural resource you are talking about, for instance, if it's a river that is going to be affected, I think there will be mitigation on how the river sources are going to be protected. If it's a well that is going to be affected, it is different. So each kind of issues have got different mitigation measures. But I think for me the key question really is how do we ensure that you can monitor the obligations that the investment has made in terms of the mitigation impacts that they have made. You cannot have one mitigation measure. I think it's different according to the impact. But it's a very, very good question because that's where we lose each other. People just end up at, they've seen the mitigation, but they will not really follow the mitigation measures. How long are they going to take? So maybe I will throw
So like my colleague has explained, the type of activity will determine, will inform the type of mitigation that needs to be taken into place. But the general rule, for example, is that there is a requirement that they must ensure, like you are saying, if they have dark boards, those pits and everything, that they are buried and then there is revegetation that is undertaken. But again, the practicality of it depends on the type of activity. I can give an example. In Lusaka, we have Tiffany's Canyons along Kafuwe Road, which is, how can I explain it?
It's now a recreation area, but I think what has been used are those trenches that were created.
It's an example of a remediation that has taken place because of the type of gardens that were created. Burying them because of the water and everything becomes impossible. So then it's turned into a resort where people can actually go and do recreational activities. But depending on the size and the magnitude, the general requirement is that they must be able to revegetate, meaning that they must be able to bury them and then plant other things that they can plant in there for purposes of ensuring that they are growing. My colleague here talked, I hope it's now been answered, Your Royal Highness.
In the context of taxation and mining in Zambia, the central government through the Ministry of Finance plays a very significant role in collecting tax revenues and spending. My question is, what do you think are the challenges, the gaps, and the opportunities in this regard? In less than 1 minute.
Mineral resources, or potentially the oil and gas we have in Zambia, form part of our subsoil assets. So when we talk about Zambia being a rich country, we actually include in that valuation the minerals that we have. Secondly, these resources are non-renewable. So once we extract them and we do not harness the potential of the resource, it basically means that we are depleting our subsoil assets and becoming poorer. If we extract 15 grams of gold today, send it to China and do not harness the potential of that 15 grams, it basically means that Zambia has become poorer because of depleting our subsoil assets. Unique characteristics about the extractive industry, mining, is that it requires large upfront investments, and this is why tax frameworks are usually set and designed in such a way that they incentivize the sector so that they can continue to invest and recover the investments that they put in. Most importantly, mining is known to cause disruptions to livelihoods and disruptions to the environment. And this basically speaks to why uniquely for the extractive sector, for the mining sector, we have a tax instrument or revenue collection instrument called royalties. Royalties by the Revenue Authority and in the Public Finance Act of 2004 are defined as a compensation for the extraction of our natural resources.
In this case, minerals such as coal, gold, emerald, scoreboard, and now we do have good deposits. My question is, what measures do you think should the country put in place in order to maximize tax collection from the mines, but without negatively hindering the growth of the industry and the welfare of the community? We can start with Reverend Chikoya.
A layman's perspective, one needs to have a system that is consistent, that is predictable, and a transparent and competitive kind of tax regime with other countries. If other countries are able to get maximum benefits, what is so special about Zambia, that we are failing to make sure that we put the right mechanisms of getting the right taxes so that whether there are fluctuations upwards or downwards, I don't know why in Zambia it is always much easier to respond, especially from the government and other regulators, when it is in their favor. But when it is in the favor of the community or the people, they always talk about old stock and other things and all kinds of gymnastics. And so, speaking as a clergyman, speaking on behalf of the people of Zambia, what ideally we need is just minimum tax systems that are easy to understand, easy to implement. We must not give too much, and we must make sure that we are able to get every lacuna, every gray area should be.
If we had minimum revenue sharing mechanism, for me the way I look at it is because part of the money from the whole, there must be a certain percentage, whether 2, 5, it goes to the local government before it goes to the treasury or wherever it goes. Then that money, the local government, together with the ward development committees and the group of DDDC meeting, they can sit, say, okay, this money can be, used like this. Because the way it is now, from the whole, it will fly. It will come to the treasury. Then the government will decide where to take the development, leaving out those people in total poverty.
For you to optimize revenue, you need to have the necessary tools to do so. Without a tax instrument that's speaking to excess profits, we should forget about optimizing revenue. Excess profits speaks to a windfall tax, a variable income tax. And I should mention that when we had a variable income tax, which is a form of resource rent tax or excess profit tax, we collected zero tax, which brings me to the problem that we have. The problem that we have probably is a weak enforcement of the existing law and some of the gaps that are there and disparities in international tax rules that allow mining companies to form of manipulate the costs in terms of paying more in terms of management fees, in terms of paying more interest fees on debt, and in terms of paying for other services so that these are recorded as companies that are not making stable and enough profits. Evidence of these occurrences are there in the Finance Intelligence Center report of 2015, are there in the Finance Intelligence report of 2019, and so many other reports that show that some of these incidences are why, as a country, we've been frustrated in terms of collecting excess profit tax, in terms of optimizing revenue from the mining sector, and we've decided to put pressure in terms of changes for royalty collection, which essentially in the end will limit government's ability to allocate part of the royalties to expenditure like Madam Mokemwin mentioned.
Most of these companies, what they say is, for us, in our company, we have adopted to help you with education. Does the community need that? The others will say, okay, us will help you with this. Does the community need that? I remember meeting one of my colleagues, John. He's a resident, he's a Briton. We sat with me talking about the mining system in Zambia. And he told me, Madam Muke, most of the people you meet in this meeting, they are not the owners of mining. Sometimes even your company does not even reach the owner. Because us who have mining, we have our own board. So most of the time you talk to the employees and they want to protect
their job. They want to maximize the profit so that the owner of the company says, yes, they are working well. So, corporate social responsibility, we cannot rely on it to say to develop this country. That's why earlier on I said, mineral revenue sharing mechanism, it was there. It's easy for us when we put in all the necessary documents so that now we can, utilize it properly. It was already there, we can do it.
We are tired and fed up of corporate social responsibility crimes. It is high time, affirming what was said I'm not saying that it shouldn't be there, but I'm saying we should not be hoodwinked or tranquilized by that trap of corporate social responsibility, because it is not going to develop our country and our communities. And so the traditional leadership, the people of Zambia, the communities need to move from writing appeal letters. We need you to paint our school, we need you to grade our road. They need to move from there into the boardroom as shareholders. So I affirm that kind of position. We must move from the begging kind of situation into the boardroom where we can speak and be heard.
I take 4 questions, 2 from their Royal Highnesses and then 2 from the civil society. Please, I request that you are brief in your questions so that we leave room for the other sessions that we are about to have. Chief Chikanda.
The government introduced the sales tax, but later, which was actually discussed, even the ZRA welcomed it. But later, the coming of Dr. Walengan as a finance minister, they replaced the sales tax to value-added tax. What was wrong with the sales tax? Thank you.
We refuse to be relegated to ceremonial movements. We want to be recognized as leaders. How can that be done? Decentralization, this devotion, shedding off some powers from the central government should not just go to the council. Let it go to the traditional rulers as well. That's one area. The second one is on the revenue sharing. We want you to come out clear on this one also. We feel that this social corporate responsibility is not enough compensation for people losing their inheritance that should have looked after the people from generations to generations, as had been the case.
I think one of the biggest challenges we have as a country, and maybe that also translates at the chiefdom level, is that we lack the information on the stocks of natural resources we have, whether it's forests, whether it's minerals, whether it's fisheries. We also lack information on maybe the values or potential profits that can be generated, right? So that as tax revenues are calculated, you have a base under which what you are being told is sort of the base of the taxes that have been raised. There's also a proper lack of information in terms of the opportunity cost. I think the opportunity cost in terms of lost inheritance, for generation, lost other alternative livelihoods, so that decisions are better informed, both at the national level and also at the level of the traditional leaders. So I think my question is, are there best practices from around the world that we can look to that will put the country and our traditional leaders in a stronger position when negotiating, and not only just looking at corporate social responsibility, that it's not enough, not even just looking at how much of the road is coming
we know, water is life, as we say, but I think that it forms the basis of everything that we actually do. And therefore, everyone has a right to water, and not only water to drink, but water for productive use. And for an institution like ours, who are promoting water for productive use, we have seen that there is a huge gap, and most of the provision and rights we speak about water really surround about clean drinking water and probably sanitation. But I think we must expand this, that we can create economies in rural communities using water, because it's an essence. In agriculture, you need water, whether you like it or not. So the livelihoods of people should be embodied around this great resource as water. Secondly, water should also be used to create alternative livelihoods in communities. I think it is one area that we have undermined. And vis-a-vis considering the issues around mining, which we know these are depleting resources, I think we could take advantage of water as a right to stimulate economic growth in terms of growing other crops and keeping animals and connected to nutrition. And I must say, because obviously my 1 minute is up, it's difficult to discuss within that limitation. I think also water as a right should be embodied together with the role of traditional leaders. I wish that His Royal Highness Chief Macha can be awarded for his water system at his palace that is used for irrigation, for instance, and livestock. I think we must go above creating infrastructure that is much more latest. Why would we be subjecting our people to infrastructure that is ancient? For instance, some mines would drill a hand bore, a hand pump bore, and celebrate and spend so much money when that hand bore would only be the cost of the breakfast we had today.
Water indeed is a human right aspect. And I like quoting from some literary sources. I would want to say sometimes we feel in our country that all Zambians are independent, that we have broken the shackles of colonialism, and therefore we are free, but then some Zambians are more free than others. I think that's what has been misunderstood to be the case in point. But what's supposed to happen is all Zambians, or rather, the way it's supposed to be is all Zambians are free, and all Zambians, no Zambian should appear to be more free or less free than the other. So when it comes to water, the fact that somebody is living on the Copper Belt or in Lusaka should not mean that they should have more rights or they should have better access to clean water and sanitation facilities than those who are living, on the fringes of the country, like some of us who are in the poorest province of Zambia, which is Kapata province.
Natural resource management is the keeping of the natural resources that we have. So it includes water, the land, and everything that's in there. And by management, we also mean that we are trying to preserve our natural resources so that we can use it not only for the youth that are here, but also for the future generation as well. So in short, I feel natural resource management is just basically that.
It really has to do with us human beings taking care of this environment that we have been given and being custodians of these natural resources. So the fact that we are able to care for them, the fact that we are able to manage them in the way that they should be managed, that's what that means to me.
We have come with a deliberate policy that leaders at whatever level should be able to also do something.
The only qualification to be a leader, you must also be involved into any activity of production. We've talked too much about youth. What is youth? We must be leading youth in terms of production. Doesn't matter how old you are, what you are, whatever level you are in leadership, you must also be involved into any type of activity involvement. We must do away with the pronouncement of the youth must, when after school you'll be employed, how many can you employ? Every day with thousands of students coming out of colleges, universities, how many are going to employ? We must go away with that kind of announcement. We take our children to school to prepare them for self-employment. We must emphasize on that. You're going to the university or the college, whatever you're going to qualify in, you must qualify to do your own job, profession. If you can get the employment, very good. We should not take them for granted to say, you'll be employed. Employment is a very, very serious issue in any country. Go to America or any other country. Employment is even worse than you have in Zambia, unemployment at all. It's the worst. People in the developed countries like America, it doesn't matter, you come out of university, you have to do something for yourself. Here, we are saying, you'll be employed, What kind of employment are you going to give them? Now we've got the problem. We have got more youth unemployment than the leaders themselves. So, we must be very careful in terms of what we tell the youth. Yes, you can get employment if you're lucky. Don't promise them anything.
I noted that this dialogue has been organized by an NGO, the Center for Environmental Justice, to discuss with traditional leaders such an important matter as mining. Government is taking a backstage or an incidental involvement. The dialogue has revealed, I hope many will agree with me, the need for central government and traditional leadership to forge a harmonious approach to issues affecting our country. I want to underline the word harmonious. Harmonious approach to issues affecting our country. In doing so, we should acknowledge the dichotomy in the management of the affairs of this country, namely traditional customary authority on the one hand and central government on the other. These are two issues, but they all, or rather both, work together for the benefit and for the good of the people and the country which we live. In this regard, I suggested first that a more targeted dialogue be convened in no distant future under the auspices of central government to discuss, among other things, the relations between the two authorities, that is, traditional leadership and
we did hear in the morning that mining causes a lot of destruction, which is very true. And some of these impacts are not reversible. So what have we done in our case? We've ensured that we've put up progressive rehabilitation exercise where we identify disturbed areas annually. So those areas, as long as they are not active, we move in to rehabilitate them. That way, we are reducing on the footprint of disturbed areas. within the mine area, even just the cutting or trimming of a branch of a tree would require one to get a permit. Without the environmental department authorizing the trimming, I'm talking of trimming, not cutting, trimming of a tree, it means that tree will never be trimmed. So every disturbance of ground within the mine area will require authorization of the department. So those are some of the activities which we are doing. So at Kalumbila mine, in terms of progressive rehabilitation project to date, we've managed to rehabilitate about 120 hectares, whereas at Kansanshi, as of end of last season, we had rehabilitated about 82 hectares. So really, if you were to go on the, possibly on the chopper, you will realize that within the mine catchment areas, if there's any areas which is most intact with vegetation are the mine areas, whereas the surrounding areas have largely been disturbed. So besides the planting of trees and grass around the mine areas, we also seriously eliminating invasive woody species which are mostly destroying our biomes. So those are some of the activities which we are doing.
So mine will be a picture story. Our points of intervention: agriculture, education, health, local business development, wildlife management. Those are the areas that we have prioritized as the points of CSR support. The picture you see there is our agriculture support initiatives. We are preaching farming as a business, and we are modeling high-value crops so that we get our beneficiaries to a place or to a point where they should be able to see that 1 hectare as a shop, be able to account for their time, the inputs and also the outputs. So those are the areas that we support, and clearly we have seen that giving out inputs without changing the mindset for the beneficiary to be able to see farming as a business, we are just shooting in the dark. So the points of interest, as you can see on the other pictures, is livestock management. We do promote beekeeping. Kitchen gardens were introduced. We somehow set up in a remote area where gardening was not part of the culture. It has been introduced, and now we have people having kitchen gardens and being able to supply the vegetables that are needed in the mine community as well as our canteens. So we get the vegetables that we feed our employees from the community, and we have a vehicle that moves around every day to go and pick up those vegetables from pick-up points. So that way, slowly we've seen that there's a change, and our community members are able to see that they can, instead of waiting for income at the end of the year, they can still be able to get something every day, depending on how well they plan their production. Education support. We understand that the young ones are the agents of change. I enjoyed what our sister there said. Diversification, dependence on the mining industry, and to get such an idea come from the young ones. Why are we not looking at farming? That was brilliant. And so if we have more of such people growing up, we know that the future generations are going to make a huge difference. Of course, we are doing fine, but we want to continue improvement. We invest in education because mindset transformation is key to development. The pictures you see there, we are supporting infrastructure to increase the number of classrooms. We build desks at the mine. A unique feature that has never happened in Zambia is a situation where the mine could have bulldozed all the trees there and started mining because we had the mining rights. But what we did as First Quantum was to set up a sawmill. And all the straight logs that we got from the mine, we converted that into a usable product. And what you see there is a sample of the desks that we, to date, we are producing. As we speak now, we have a target of doing at least 200 desks.
We did not request, but we made demands. And 3 demands that were made were that a full-fledged university should be built in Northwestern Province. And also, we wanted a shift from Solwezi to Mufumwe as the Northwestern Provincial headquarters. And the third, which we thought was very important, was that the resources, especially coming from timber and the mining, because we are boasting of Kalumbila, Lumana, Kansanshi, which is one of the oldest. But even in some ways, look at the township roads. They are in a horrible position. And this is why we made these 3 demands. Even Chief Choma, have now coped. They have even moved the provincial headquarters from Livingston to Choma, and Choma is doing very fine. But us in Northwestern Province, we started this idea. Nobody is listening to us. We feel so disadvantaged. And yet, these mines are making millions.
We do not have the jurisdiction, the powers to comment on this because the shift of the district administration is outside our powers. And we can only take note, and my colleague there, Brian, is taking note of that. The issue of the university, it's a need. And thank you very much for that submission. So we are going to also record that as a submission from stakeholders, as a follow-up to that. Yes. Sharing again of the resources, the 3 mines in Northwestern Province and the quality of public infrastructure in Solwezi district. I can only share what we are doing, some of the interventions that we've put in place under Kansanshi mine for the urban roads in Solwezi. We've gone into an arrangement with the local authority to use part of the resources supposed to be paid to the council as a way of trying to do some of the community roads, in addition to the other roads that we support through our CSR initiative. Again, it's a good submission and we've taken note of follow-ups. It's unfortunate I cannot comment on the first and the second item because our hands are tied on that. I think we'll submit to the district administration officially that we've got this for
Okay, so we could have in that order, we could start with Madam Chimia, who can give us closing remarks from representing Center for Environment Justice Board and the Secretariat.
Your Royal Highnesses, the consortium partner leads, all distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, I would like on behalf of the board chairperson of the Center for Environmental Justice, Mr. Vincent Ziba, and the rest of the CEJ board to say thank you for the great participation and enthusiasm from the beginning till now. Thank you so much to everyone. It's been great. Thank you so much. The intention of this meeting was to come up with actionable resolutions that have been achieved. What's going to happen now is that a communique is going to be developed, and then that communique will be shared. First, it will be shared with the Royal Highnesses. The Royal Highnesses will be visited. The communique will be delivered to them at to their places, and the rest thereafter, after it's been validated by the Royal Highnesses, the rest of the team will also receive the same communique using the same communication channels that we have that we've been using to get you to this place. So thank you very much, everyone, for participating. Thank you so much for taking your time, to spend 2 days, like a whole day, like morning and afternoon is no joke. It's a lot of time. There's a lot that a person can do within the many hours that you have spent here. But thank you so much for taking that time. And then on the IEC materials, whatever has been shared here, the presentations, everyone can be assured that they will be shared to you via the same channels that we have used. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Madam Nalucha, WWF. Okay, Madam Nachilala. They all start with Na, so I beg your pardon.
We are the mothers of somebody. Your Royal Highnesses, our dear consortium partners, distinguished guests, and friends, on my behalf, on the behalf of the Worldwide Fund for Nature, ActionAid, and Bread for the World, I just want to take this opportunity to sincerely thank all of you for investing 2 whole days to discuss one of the most important topics or issues that affects the welfare of every Zambian in your chiefdoms, in the various communities that you're actually working in. I think the last 2 days have been a great investment. We have learned a lot. One thing that we've learned is that a number of the key issues that came up are urgent and are areas of shared concern by all of us. We as a consortium have learned a lot, but we also hope, as participants being brought together, you were able to make a connection in seeing that, this issue that I'm facing in my area is the same issue that the other area is facing, and maybe we can share ideas in terms of how we start addressing some of these issues. Your Royal Highnesses, you've been very clear in terms of your recommendations for actions and policy changes at many levels that needs to happen. Our commitment as a consortium is to consolidate that information and make sure that it is actually delivered to all the key relevant government bodies that must act. But my appeal to you is that the issue that we touched on here is a subset of a bigger problem that we are facing as a country. We are losing our natural resources at a fast rate, and our levels of poverty in the country is also increasing at a fast rate. So our natural resources are supposed to help us beat poverty, but the two things are not meeting. So this for us is the beginning of a conversation in terms of what are we proposing, not just in mining, but in other sectors, in terms of how our natural resources are going to be managed in a sustainable way to make sure that people now in Zambia can benefit, but also future generations are not also compromised in that respect. I will not attempt to summarize all the recommendations that came out of this meeting, but I just want to highlight a few key points that stood out that we definitely would like to make sure that we follow up on. As Your Royal Highnesses, you were very clear on the need for greater involvement of traditional leadership in developing sustainable mining agenda for the country, but also mining developments in your area. We still have a situation where, yes, you are consulted, there are several consultation processes that are there, but there's a feeling that was coming out in the room that, one, you are still on the periphery of these important processes that should bring opportunities and benefits to local communities. There was also a key point that has been raised that even in areas where mining investments have gone, there's still a feeling that the communities are not completely benefiting, and the accountability on ecological impact is not strong. ZEMA was on the floor today, and it was very clear that some of the regulations and the conditions that they give a range of investors, including mining investors, that information is not available to the public. So our hope is that through this dialogue that we have started, institutions such as ZEMA can be strengthened in their mandate. And what I was hearing also from this meeting is that we want to see the Environmental Management Act reformed so that we have a ZEMA that has stronger teeth, we have a ZEMA that can defend and fight for the rights of every Zambian. So many of the mining concessions or mining hotspots are located under customary land, the land that is under your jurisdiction. So it creates this unique opportunity and justification for your request and your demand to be moved to the boardroom, from maybe the advocacy room as equal stakeholders and equal partners to the developmental agenda. What that requires is the review of the Mining Act we heard, and the current process to review it provides an opportunity which we are encouraging you as organizers, you take advantage of to put forward ideas on the adjustments that need to happen to the Mining Act so that social benefits, environmental protection, and governance is actually assured. We have a problem where there's just way too many mining licenses for exploration that are issued in national parks or protected areas. It's like we are people who have not made a decision. Do you want to promote tourism in a particular area or want to do mining? On one piece of land, you can't do three things: mining, agriculture, and so on. So there's a need for some kind of order and coordination between different government entities that are driving the developmental agenda to reduce the conflicts that we see today. I think in today's discussion also on taxation, it was noted that there's a need for the fiscal regime in the mining sector to change so that there's a sense that the benefits from that regime is actually coming down also to areas where these resources are actually found. We as consortium partners, and we believe as yourselves, we want the same thing. We want sustainable development for our areas, but we don't want development that is destructive. And therefore, I was hearing clear calls for green investments. Yes, we want investments to come in these areas to create more opportunities, but it's not an investment that will be there for 3-5 years. After 5 years, there are big environmental, health, and social problems that we have to deal with. It has also been noted that we as a country perhaps need to invest a bit more in terms of understanding the value of our stock of natural resources, mining being one of them, forests, and so on. And once we understand the value, then when we get to a table to negotiate with any investor coming in, we can partner. We can engage as equal partner. Information is power. So I just want to take this opportunity once more to sincerely thank you for your engagement, for your participation. For us, we extend the spirit of partnership. We want to work with you as our partners, as our traditional leaders, but we do not want a kind of partnership where after this meeting you sit back. We are going to continue pushing government, but we also want to see more leadership coming from the chiefdoms. Tell us what you're doing to protect the environment, and the only thing that we can do is to strengthen your effort and strengthen your voice to make sure that the things that you demanded the last 2 days are actually realized. So thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Madam Nachilana. I think we are talking of partnership. That is a win-win partnership, and we thank you for those remarks. And now I call upon Madam Nalucha.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon all, and the Royal Highnesses, the District Commissioners, colleagues from civil society organizations, consortium partners, all protocols observed. It is an honor to stand once again before you to give our closing remarks as an institution. As ActionAid, we're very happy with the 2 days deliberations that have gone on, but also the space that has been created by CCJ in terms of bringing together various partners as well as communities on board in terms of trying to find solutions to the issues that are eroding our country. As we look at issues of environment, we should not look at it in a different space. It still comes down to the issues of governance and the broader poverty that this country is witnessing, yet it's so much endowed with so many natural resources. On our part as an institution, we work using the human rights-based approach, and we believe that power resides in the people, and it's only people who can change the status quo. So we believe in shifting power. And one of the things we hope to see at the end of this conference is not just for it to end up as a talk show, but to see implementation from the various partners who have been on board in terms of what are the concrete steps and actions that we are going to take forward in as far as shifting power to the rightful power holders in all these conversations we have had. We have, I know one of the things that we are very good at as a country is crafting policies, but when it comes to implementation, that's where we seem to have a number of challenges. But we hope that this space has helped us to identify where some of our policies are not properly coming together and where we need to strengthen them. I was privileged to be part of a side session this afternoon, and one of the discussion was hinged around relocation. There's been no relocation in this country which has pleased the indigenous people who have been relocated. So what has been the issue? And you will realize that the issue of community relocations lies with so many ministries. There's a Ministry of Lands, there are the councils, which is Ministry of Local Government, there's resettlement, and at the end of the day, there's also the traditional leaders as well as the corporations on one hand. But why are we failing over the years to craft a plan which by now we should have been exporting to the outside world, considering that as Zambia we have been mining for over 100 years now, and we are still relying on external experts in terms of leading us onto the mining sector. So these are some of the pressing questions that of course we cannot answer in such a conference, but these are some of the things as developmental practitioners we need to be asking ourselves, working with our local universities as well as various entities present to find solutions that are befitting in terms of our country and our people. And it's with these few remarks that I would like to say that this conference, from on our end, it has met our expectation. It has been a success, but as one of the chiefs had earlier alluded to or said in one of the sessions yesterday, to say they hope to see some of these discussion forums which are being created taken to local communities, and these discussions happening in the local localities where some of these issues are being faced with in terms of environmental degradation, as well as the effects of investments and the developmental paths that we are taking as a country. And as we come to the end of this conference, yes, we need solutions, but also let's bear in mind that as a country we are now sitting on a 27 billion debt, which is way beyond our country GDP. And even as we are saying that we need to intensify budgetary allocation towards environmental protection as well as monitoring of our natural resources and improving our environment, the resource envelope, however, in terms of the physical liquidity, we don't have it as a country. So where do we rely on? We have to make sure that we're exploiting our natural resources for the benefit of this country. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so she's mentioned power to the people. So we should be thinking, what kind of power do we have? Do we have power to implement? Do we have power for good technologies that are going to speak to the environment? Do we have good investments that we are investing in our environment? Thank you very much, Madam. Now I call upon Madam DC, Madam Shina Mulea.
Good evening, everyone. Royal Highness is present. The civil society's organization present. All invited guests that are here, the media, ladies and gentlemen, or may I simply say, all protocols observed. On behalf of government, and indeed on my own behalf, I would want to thank the Royal Highnesses, more especially, for actually participating in this EPD Environmental Protection Dialogue. Remember, the President has shown leadership by committing the biodiversity safeties that are actually supposed to be implemented. As the District Commissioner of Sinazongwe, I want to actually say I'm so happy to be part of this journey, because at the end of the day, this project is lying in my district. So to the Royal Highnesses, we want to tell you to say you are a good partner in this development, and therefore we'll always be consulting you. Therefore, for this reason, I would want to thank the media and everyone who actually participated in this. So with these few remarks, I have nothing more to say. I would say let's start this journey and end it together with a smiling heart. God bless you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Madam Shina. And thank you for opening up the district to various activities. I think Sinazongwe is quite hive to issues of climate change, the impacts of climate change there, including the mining, the coal mining that is emitting a lot of carbon. And we thank you that you are welcoming us in terms of implementing the civil society, the tradition leaders, and everybody, that we could work together to see to it that we protect our environment. At this point in time, allow me now to invite our Royal Highness, the Ngambela, to represent the chiefs in the closing remarks, and from there I'll ask a vote of thanks that will come from Chief Nshima. Thank you.
Your Royal Highnesses and fellow traditional leaders, the organizers of this conference, or rather the dialogue, members of the press and government officers who are here. It is a rare opportunity for me to say a few words with regard to the meeting we have had all these days. But I should say it is also rare for traditional leaders from across the country to gather in one spot for 2 days, passing their minds on one topic. And this time, it is a topic on national environmental protection towards a sustainable mining sector through green investment for nature. This is an important meeting, and we thank the organizers. We thank government really for giving us this opportunity, for availing us the chance to meet and discuss. We thank everybody who has been involved in this meeting in whatever capacity, because the meeting has not been common or unimportant, because it opened the awareness of the details involved in the mining operations and how these operations impact on the environment in which they are carried out. The meeting also raised suggestions on issues to be considered as a way forward after this meeting regarding the role of traditional leaders in the protection of the environment. This meeting has also given an opportunity for inter-Royal Highness exchanges, exchanges which would have been very difficult if each one remained in their own chiefdoms. But the meeting has given us a chance. Here it reminds me of what King Lewanika of the Lozi people said in 1902 when he visited London. And he was asked by the press, "You as a black person from Africa are here in London. What do you want to discuss with the Queen?" They are referring to Queen Victoria then. In his wit and wisdom, he said, when kings meet, they are not short of what to discuss. And this is exactly what happened when our Royal Highnesses met here. They were not short of what to discuss. In addition to the topic here, they also had informal meetings where they were discussing issues related to their own chiefdoms, related to chiefdom affairs. So I'm very grateful for this. It is expected that after 2 days of very active participation, their Royal Highnesses will be tired and will want to go back home. But my request here is that as they go home, they should reflect on the issues, very important issues that were discussed, and find ways of implementing or putting into action those suggestions which were raised during this important meeting. The panelists were very active and eloquent in presenting the issues that they were given to present. And they did it very well, and we listened to them. I hope this material, which was provided both as slides on the screen and also verbally here, will be provided to all participants so that we can follow the proceedings of this dialogue in our own homes, in our spare time. Traditional leaders, our Royal Highnesses, and all participants, I'm pleased that you have been here all this time. One of the requests that has been raised, which we had on the screen right now, was that government must consider another meeting, a very serious and well-attended meeting where we would discuss issues pertaining to traditional leaders, government relationships, where we would discuss issues of development in our chiefdoms, where we would discuss matters pertaining to mining, since we are now dealing with mining. But there will be many other issues of common interest that we would look at. I wish you a safe trip back to your homes, everyone who is here, and I hope, in spite of the ravages of COVID-19, we shall return to our homes safe and quarantined. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We can now have the vote of thanks from Chief Vincent.
Having conducted such a wonderful and successful conference, dubbed Environmental Protection Dialogue 2020, whose theme is towards a sustainable mining sector in Zambia through green investment for nature and people impact. To the Center for Environmental Justice, we wish to thank you very much and ask for God's blessing so that you succeed in your endeavors. To the other partners, civil societies, FBOs, private sector, NGOs, government representatives, we would also want to thank you for your active participation and sharing for the information that we have gathered. To our fellow participants, let's all go to our various organizations and chiefdoms to disseminate and, more importantly, to implement the information that we have shared and acquired through this powerful and wonderful dialogue. As Zambians, we are well known for conducting good workshops. Our weakness is the implementation of what we have acquired. Like we have all noted, we would want to involve government, a high-level representation to be in attendance at such wonderful workshops, because the invited guests and delegates are going back with some of the answers not answered, as some of the questions or concerns that have been raised could not be answered by the government representation that have been around. It's also our humble request to the conference organizers that these wonderful and good workshops should be brought to our chiefdoms, because that is where the mining, bad effects and deforestation are heavily affected. Our people will really appreciate also to have this knowledge. As we all go back to our various destinations, we pray for God's traveling mercies and blessings, and with the powers vested in me by the powerful and useful NGO Center for Environmental Justice, I declare the EPD 2020 officially closed, and I thank you.